welcome to Rainbows and Silver Linings. My name is Jennifer, and this is our third episode, and I am really excited to have as our guest William Archibald that I'll be bringing on in just a moment. But first, just to tell you a little bit about the show, Rainbows and Silver Linings, this is all about finding the good things in life. The rainbow is God's symbol that he's not going to destroy us, at least not by flooding. And we have that to look forward to, right? And then the silver lining is that even in the midst of a storm, there are good things that are coming from it, even if it's just that the rain is coming to be able to water the plants that are coming in the spring. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on William. Hi, William. How you doing?
Doing all right, Jen. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I see
Great.
You've got some campaign flags back there behind you. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, a quick story, right quick. Let me knock everything over.
Okay.
For the Patriots, man. All you guys are so awesome. This is how YouTubers are, man. Shannon sent me this in the mail. As a gift. I got it, and the American flag is something I've had. I just sort of stick it in my American motor distributor right here, so we can. The camera's not doing a very good job picking it up, but
yeah.
That's our shot. But Shannon sent me that, and I've also got some other cool items that Shannon had sent me. One of them was a Nixie tube clock, which I'm a vintage guy. I love to see some of the old things that still survive today, because people that mess with technology nowadays don't know how hard some people had it when it came down to trying to figure out how to make a circuit when you had nothing to work with. You had to figure out all the dynamics to how everything laid out. Those were the pioneers. So all that old vintage stuff is just fun for me.
Oh, yeah. That's great. Yeah. Well, Shannon from Devoted Patriots is awesome. And if you guys are watching, you haven't heard of him before, I'll put a link down in the description. He's also got a second channel, Devoted Patriots 2, TOO, that we're trying to help him grow. But about you, William, you had called me a few days back. We were talking about amateur radio and your love of that and getting into it. And you told me that a little bit about your story. And I think that your story is great to encourage people. And so I was wondering if you might be willing to share that here.
So like the beginnings of it and how it all came to be?
And how you got to be where you are right now, a mechanic doing YouTube videos.
This is fun because I'm gonna have to figure out where it started. I kind of came I came to the scene when I was little, just doing this. When it came time for every year for Christmas, my mom and my grandmother would buy me stuff for Christmas, and I would find some way to get it taken apart to see what went on inside of it. It's always fascinated. You had these things, you had these objects. This is my microphone. All these things, they worked, and they're these things, and so it was a mystery to me. So I would want to take these things apart and see what was in there. And over time, that they learned to, one, not leave me unattended very long. Two, not buy anything expensive for Christmas. And like I remember getting like an awesome day. One of my best Christmas gifts was from my Uncle Bob, who was an electrician, and my mom and grandma all bought me all this fancy stuff. And I'm like, yay, okay, this is nice. And my Uncle Bob came in with a box full of like screws, nuts, bolts, washers, circuit boards, all kind of just junk that he had laying around, and threw it in a big old box. And I opened it up, and I played with that stuff for weeks. Ever. And he didn't cost him anything. I remember years later him talking about that. He's like, yeah, I remember your mom and your grandma spending all that money on Christmas, and I bought this junk over there, and they were mad at me because that's all you played with. Anyhow, that was my secret of knowledge. Well, always fascinated with the fact that communications existed. Always, or just fascinated by just when I seen on TV people talk from one person to the next on a CB or something. Okay, kind of started as a CB, and then knowing there was technology behind it, that was real fascinated with electromagnetic waves and how they propagate off antennas. Then all of a sudden, I'm connected with things that have to do with our physiological being, how the earth operates, the core, and goes deep into like things like, you think about just how smart God was to create such an intricate device that operates on its own self in a sense with the magnetic fields and reacts to the environment that was made around it by God. so that it actually self-sustains. The earth will do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about messing with radios and electromagnetic fields, now you're manipulating that a little bit. You're kind of playing with some neat natural events. And so, getting into the radios was fun because I got to tinker. I got to mess with wires and figure out different ways to make antennas. And then as I grew up, I wanted to learn more about how these things operated. I loved high voltage. I liked, the association between electricity or electronics and our core self are so aligned that, because they use particle accelerators to figure out all the things that go on with us that are, on a cellular level. And that's all magnetic fields, induction, wiring. And so that was all fascinated. So got into that and was just fascinated with the whole technology of just being able to pulse a magnetic wave into a frequency and make it go out an antenna and somebody hear it. That's as simple as that, but it's driven me lifelong.
So from the very beginning, you kind of started before you got into doing cars, you were more interested in the radios to begin with. So how did you switch over to becoming a mechanic?
Okay. Well, and that's a neat observation. Yes, I was. Growing up, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. So I thought, except I realized that math was my crutch, not my thing. I'm just not wired for learning math. I'm pretty good at some things on math, but to be an electrical engineer would take a whole nother level of understanding that I really decided to go a different route. Okay, got older and more able to get out and do things on my own, and realized that building things was really fun. And I had a mind for being able to understand, since I did take so many things apart, that's how things sort of already started operating. And for some reason, I took a love of vehicle, well, just motors. Like when I was 14, I started a small engine business in the summertime, fixing all my neighbors' lawnmowers. It all started when I was riding my bicycle. I think I was 12. Can't remember exactly what age that was. But wait, I had a neighbor rode a bicycle in the neighborhood, and I seen him just pulling and pulling and pulling on that thing. And like I say, getting all this stuff out of the dump, I took all these motors apart. Well, sometimes I'd take 2 or 3 and make one just to see if I could get it to do it. I took his lawnmower home. I had enough parts from motors I'd gotten out of the dump. I put his back together. I charged him like $60, and that was like thousands of dollars to me when you're like 12 back in the real early 90s. And he was tickled to death because the lawnmower wasn't very old. And so after that, I just started like picking up work from the neighbors all around the neighborhood all summer long, and did that for a while. And then, of course, I got older and started like, being a kid again for a little bit, but always dabbled with that stuff. Never, I had calluses on my hands when I was like 13 from just taking things apart and working on stuff.
And you learned to do a business out of it too, at least for a time, even while you were a child.
Well, I run this business myself now, which is this. I run a shop. It's 5 bays, 3 lifts. And thank goodness there's plenty of work, but could I ever explain what actually made me be this way? I don't know. I have no explanation for it, because as a kid, you couldn't leave me alone. Like my mom, when they left me alone, next thing you know, I'd be under the hood of the car, taking stuff out of it, because I had to see what was in there. And it's like people that are painters, artists, they just, something happens and they're just driven in that direction. And that would be me. And to toot my own whistle, I'm really good at what I do. I really am. It's like
so at 13, and dealing with fixing your neighbors' lawnmowers, they didn't ask, all right, well, show me your degree, show me your certifications, tell me where you've been registered at the state that you're allowed to do this. The proof was in the pudding. You fixed it, you got paid.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it to you like this. What I was first tasked with were things that were just that, like, my neighbor across the street had a lawnmower that he had been held together with coat hangers, so it'd be no loss if it didn't get fixed. Well, lo and behold, a few days later, I pushes his lawnmower, all the new bolts, everything all fixed up nice, and it just amazed him. Well, he told his barber about me. His barber was like, he had this big, huge bow saw. Remember the old bow saws with the big, huge blade that had that big loop in it? Remember those some years ago?
Bow
they had regular chainsaws with a regular blade.
I know what you're talking. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a big old steel bow saw. Boy, this was a humdinger, because it had a problem where there was no spark, and I had to figure out why, and come to find out the spark plug wire melted into the engine block. Well, the engine block is encased by this whole thing. You have to take the whole thing. I took that whole thing apart, and couldn't find a coil, made a spark plug wire work off of a moped, put it all back together, and got it back to him for like $50. And I was 13 when that happened, and that same guy still has that bow saw and doesn't use it anymore, but it still runs. It's in his building. But and all these people just lived up down the road, so I got word of mouth. And
Uh-huh.
so between all that, I stayed plenty busy for like 12, 13-year-old in the summertime.
Oh,
My grandma
absolutely.
would have to go buy them a part. She'd go up to the saw place, and I'd give them the cereal. My grandma would have to go get everything and bring it back.
Mhm.
And it drove her nuts.
Now you started working for the garage that you now own and operate yourself. You worked for the man that owned that before. So what did he need to know from you that you were qualified to do this? Did you go to any sort of trade school, or is this something that just the fact that you were just doing all of this on your own that he was like, "Yep, you know how to do it."
Well, so to become where I got to do that where I am at now, there were several things that took place before that. So having the love of all the things I wanted to do, except for school. I hated school. School was awful. Um, I decided that I wasn't going to go anymore after the eighth grade. I told my grandma and mom that it's not going to happen. And to be able to do that when I was in kindergarten, see, I kind of grew up from a little rough childhood. My
Mhm.
mom wasn't all, she was my mom. We love her. But I didn't go to school at kindergarten, a lack of attendance. I had to redo it. And
Mhm.
so that was one year held back. And then gotten around to the eighth grade and just family life, things were really weird. I had to go live with my grandmother. So there was things that were going on inside of me that weren't exactly normal for most kids. And so school, I was really rebellious in school, which is fine. I don't look back on that and regret it one bit because, dude, anyways. So I just quit. I didn't want to go to school half the time where I was suspended that year in eighth grade. They held me back again or in
Mhm.
another year. So now here I am. I'm like, if another few months, I could drive to the eighth grade. And I wasn't uneducated. I mean, I do really good on schoolwork when I decided to do it. I was
Mhm.
diagnosed with that ADHD thing, but I
Oh,
think
I I have that throughout my family. I totally know what that is.
well, that diagnosis is just an observation. It's not a sickness. I
Mhm.
promise you. The way
It's
that
a
they
learning
portray it,
style.
it's just a lifestyle altogether. And
Mhm.
if you allow that person, if you give that person a little bit of structure and a little bit of room to breathe, you'd be surprised what they can do. Which is kind of I'm the product of that.
Mhm.
And so, like I say, the ADHD is not a sickness or whatever. It's just it's diagnosed as it's an observation to me. It's just, to me when I
Mhm.
say somebody says ADHD, you're blessed because half the time you're too busy figuring things out for yourself for somebody to. But you still listen to outside input. But anyway, so getting back to where, so my first job was, let's see, my first job was a roofer. I
Mhm.
was, I wanted to work. Didn't want to go to school. I wanted to make money on my own, and I wanted to learn some kind of trade. Okay, which everything I've done has taught me so well all through life. Roofing
It's
was a
amazing how
hard.
God puts the stepping stones into place so that, what you end up doing, it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had all the steps before that.
So when you work with a roofing crew, you work with a group of guys they've been down usually bad roads. Just because of just not all, but like I worked for a roofing crew. Most of the people had been to prison, and they're older people, and they'd been out, and all of them were Christians now, but they could tell you stories about all the things. So you learn a lot about life. They would pick at me so bad. They picked at me so bad just because I was only like 16 at the time, 15, 16. This little skinny dude that couldn't hardly haul a bundle of shingles up the ladder because and so but they liked me. And I
Mhm.
worked for them for about a year, and I learned all kind of different ways to work with a situation where you have a house that's got rot, it's not square. So you had to learn how to work around, the problems that came about when you're working on older houses, things that weren't done right. So you had to have ingenuity, and you learned how to do things with wood and different cuts and different things and different ways to make things fit. And then did that for a while, and then went into working on vehicles as a my first job was at a garage where I just changed oil and tires. That's all I was hired to do. Um, and when I started working there, I worked there for about maybe 3 to 4 months, and then he got really, really backed up in work. And when he did, it forced him to put me on bigger stuff because he just had to do it. I was there. I didn't have a lot of tires to put on. So he's like my first big job, which I'd already been dabbling a little bit at home, but I hadn't really done anything major. I've been helping the other guy whenever he needed to hold something or get something lined up, and then I'd help him put a few bolts in. So I had pretty much the gist of it, and it all came to me anyways. It was no problem. I pulled the
Mhm.
transmission out and put an oil pump in it, and everything went perfect. So he seen that I could do that, and then I started changing out engines, learning the lot bigger work. Then I would, he would diagnose things and have me change the part. And then I watched how he would diagnose things. So I learned how to do, electrical pinouts to find reference voltages and everything. All the whole time, never given up on any of the stuff that I was interested in before. I played with CB radios as a kid, had different antennas I made. Well, when I worked for that guy as a mechanic, the pay was no good. And I got an opportunity to work as an electrician. This guy come up and said, I need somebody to, he was an excellent electrician, and we did everything from house wiring to installing big, huge alarm systems. I put in
but
big.
Again, none of this is actual like a trade school. All of this has been on the job.
Yeah.
What I could tell so
far.
Okay.
I used I got my own self up. I looked for jobs in the newspaper. My job, that's how I got the roofing job. And I got the mechanic job from a friend of mine's dad who did advertisement for his radio station, which when I was a kid in middle school, I lived with this dude. He was my friend, and we lived together in middle school because my family life was so bad that I didn't want to live at home. And they didn't care if I did not stay at home. So I stayed with this dude with this, we were the same age, but his dad owned a radio station. So when I was in middle school, before I quit, I used to go in there on the mornings on Saturdays, and I would fire up the big transmitter. It was a big AM 50 kW transmitter, and I get to hit the step start buttons and watch the tubes all light up. And then the technician would come in there and work on it, and I'd watch him and do things and all. So just surrounded myself in this. So getting into the part where when I was working for the mechanic that didn't want to pay very well, through the electrician's job, was through the same guy who did the advertisements. He advertised for a bunch of people, but I was able to place myself. You always look for opportunities. You never just sit there and wait for something.
So your initial inclination was not to petition the government to raise the minimum wage?
No, I made $5.25 an hour, and I was happy to just be working.
What was the minimum wage at that? Yeah, what was the minimum wage at that point?
My first, it was $5.25 an hour.
Okay, and that's what you were making. So that's what it was a joke. Here everybody in California wants the minimum wage to be $15 an hour. Well, guess what? Instead of like increasing your knowledge base and being able to then step up and change jobs, like that's what you did. You decided to go find a job that was willing to pay you more and learn new skills doing it, rather than just saying, well, this person should be paying me more.
Half the time I didn't make a whole lot more. I would just get aggravated when I was young. And so you never really get settled for a while. So even though I probably didn't make as much as most people would think I would, I was just happy to be doing something where I learned something. That was my main goal, was learning things.
Sure.
I didn't need a lot of money to live. I didn't, really, I didn't. And so when I got to
when you don't have a lot of debt, school debt, then you don't necessarily need to make as much per hour.
No. And so working as an electrician, and I got to do a lot of really technical wiring. So I got to hook up do relay circuits where you had a big bundle of wire. They all had to go in this big amp panel, or I remember one time I did a bunch of wiring in a strip club where we had to make lights all flash. Me and this dude Scott got hired to put in a big stereo system, and then we had to put in these all these stoplights, and I got to help him take the stoplights apart, actual real stoplights that this guy got in an auction, painted them black, rewired them so each one was individual, and we hooked them up, and I made these big old relay packs that were all timed with gate circuits and all, and these were all stuff that the guy would go to a Radio Shack and buy a handful of parts, and then he'd say, all right, here, put this together like this, and I'm gonna do one, and we were putting boards together. So I got a really cool open opportunity to learn how to solder, what transistors did, how you hook those things up and you bias them and all that. And so everything I did laid out a plan for me later. So, okay, I'm an electrician now for a while. And then I ended up, that guy was sort of a loose cannon himself. He was smart, but he was an alcoholic. That's why I got the job, because I needed somebody to drive the work truck. Now, this dude could wire anything. He was a genius, but like most geniuses, he had somewhat of a problem. Well, he ends up having to do time. So I had to go get a job somewhere else. So I needed something fast. I didn't care. And I already did roofing. So I jumped on a construction job, learning framing up the houses from the ground up. And that was really, it was hard work, but it was actually fun. And I liked to party back then. And most of the construction crew liked to party. So when you're like 20 years old now, or 19, somewhere right around in there, 18, all these years run together. It was a thing to do. Learned a lot. Oh, by the way, I grew up watching things like the New Yankee Workshop, the Woodwright Shop, learning the old school woodworking methods and all that just on television shows, like on public television. I did that from when I was like 2 and up. And then I worked on that construction crew, and then I sort of did things on my own, living from here to here, partying. And then I had to do a little bit of time in prison because all my driving revoked license tickets is caught up to me over time. And I get out, and I got a job. First, there were some little things in between, and then I worked changing tires and oil again. This is no joke. I got out of prison and I needed a job, and I got a job at this shop not far from where I work at now, or run the shop now, but it's in the inner parts of Carthage, or town where I live at. And got out, got the job there. It was demeaning because I was a kick. You know, I had some other mechanic jobs in between because all these years all kind of run together. So for me to remember exactly where I was every year is going to be hard. But we're talking. This was the last thing I did before I took this shop over. I still didn't have a driver's license because I had a problem with alcohol.
A mechanic without a driver's license.
I never missed a day of work, and never didn't work, by the way. So these people that say I can't go to work because I don't have a driver's license, I don't want to hear that.
Or I can't go to work because I've done time.
I did it all. I had 2 felonies. Okay.
And you can still make it happen. It's just a matter of motivation.
One of my in-between jobs while I was doing probation and off and on here and there for a year, maybe or 2, I think it was 2 years, I worked as a mechanic at a golf course. And people would say that, why would you do that if you're so good at what you do? Well, I had to do it. The people that worked there got me a job that worked there. So I had a ride to get there and back. And man, I got to learn all kind of different things about fabricating, because you had to do that under a budget at a golf course, because you have the more money you save at the end of the year, the more the kickbacks the boss man gets. So he pushes for people to try to figure out ways to make things. And I got to weld. They sent me to school, and I learned all this hydraulic stuff.
So here's some actual like formal training.
Yeah,
but up until this point, everything that you've done has been on the job.
Well, the only thing it did was just give me paperwork where I could get pay raises. This is already doing all the hydraulic work. I was working on all the electronic over hydraulic. I'd pull a valve body down and pull all the seals out of it and fix it back. But in order to get the pay bump, I just went to they call it, oh gosh, what was it called back then? STI. STI is a school that has to do with the golfing, because this area I live at is a golfing capital. Pinehurst is about 15 miles up the road is where they have all of the big golfing tournaments like Pinehurst Hotel and all that. It's just huge. So that was a big business, and it was fun. Like I say, I'm not going to lie. I did not sober up until about 30 years old. So I'm 40 now. That was 10 years ago. So all the way up to about 30, I partied really hard. And all these golf course people did too. So all my jobs, I learned a lot. I partied hard, but I never missed a day of work. And I never had a food stamp card. Just never need anything. Had myself. And then, so I'm working at that tire shop and everything, having a good time. And then there was a Saturday. I got tired of changing oil all the time. It was terrible. It was awful. One after another. Plus, like I say, I was really good mechanic. I was really good at what I did because of the other shops that I'd worked at and learned so much, things I did on my own. So I drove my 3-wheeler up here to this shop because I didn't have a driver's license. And where my house was at the time, it was about 3 miles from here. So I just I hopped on my 3-wheeler. I came up here on a Saturday, and the dude that was running the place was doing something in here. And I talked to him a little bit, and he kind of kicked the dirt. He goes, I don't know. And I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I was like, I'll work here for a couple of weeks, and you don't have to talk about pay or anything. You pay me something, but we're not going to talk about how much money is. Let me do 2 weeks here. And the audition's kind of like, gave myself a 2-week audition. And that was, gosh, like I say, that was, I got working here when I was 24 in my 20s, something like that. And I'm 40 now, and I run the place.
Yeah. Well, who can turn down, just pay me what you want and have, I mean, you had some skills already, but still that's how you hustled to get the jobs without necessarily having some sort of piece of paper to kind of prove things. And
here's the thing, it's not that easy. It's really not, because
no, it's not. But you have had a lifetime of doing this. So it's not that you woke up one morning and said, I'm going to fix cars. From the age of, when did your uncle give you all those pieces and parts?
I think I was before we moved where I was 7 years old. 7.
Okay. So this, no, I'm not saying this is easy at all, but I'm saying that it's a path, and not every path needs to go through college, or through the Army, or through something like that. You can do, trade schools, and it's not even necessarily trade schools or trade school where you're paying out thousands of dollars. If this is a love that you've had all this time and you can prove yourself, you can still find a job. You can still work your way up.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
may mean changing jobs. Like I wanted to share with you here real quick. Micro, I'm sure you've heard of him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has a foundation where they'll give money to people to go to these trade schools. So let's say they didn't have that head start when they were 7 years old, and a lifetime of learning on their own, and they want to go that route. You can
Mhm.
apply for a grant that way. They had something here funny here. So states reached 48. They've had 1,200 recipients awarded. Whiners rewarded 0.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
And I looked.
So what I mean by earlier was, as far as that remark is, it's not that easy. Is it is that easy, but it's not that easy. If you dedicate yourself to something, or if you really try hard, put your heart in it, this stuff will fall right in place, because it did for me. But the only thing that when I asked that dude, let me work here for a couple of weeks, we're not talking about money. I don't know what possessed him to allow that to happen, because most people in the right mind would
That
say
was
no. This dude
that
is
was a risk.
yeah, it was a risk on his part. That's
Mhm.
where I'm not sure exactly how I was able to pull that off, but all I know is it happened, and because I wanted it to bad enough. I think that's all it was. He could see that. I don't
Well,
know
he
how
was
that
also
works.
a small business, and I don't know how the regulations and everything work, but I know that basically, like the bigger the business, the more regulations and red tape that you have to go through. So if you
Mhm.
had gone to some, national car company, they probably would have been, no, we can't risk
Yeah,
that. We need to have.
with my record, they'd have been like,
Yeah, but I mean that's the beauty of small business also. But I also wanted to point out here that we have just a second, let me go here. Um, this is, I don't know how well you can read it, but this is just talking about the amount of jobs that are in the different trades:
yeah, I
plumbers,
see that.
roofers, carpenters, electricians. All of these are up. They have more openings, 24% in just 1 month, and the jobs are sitting unfilled for an average of 29 days. Roofer 39 days, and it's up 50%. Electrical helpers 15%, 27 days. They don't have mechanics on here, but I can imagine, mechanics are hard too, and butchers too. I have we bought a pig, a local farmer raised, and so we had to get a butcher, and he had a hard time finding a butcher. His normal butcher retired, and he had to reach out an hour and a half away to find a butcher to come. And the butcher, when he came, he said he's working a year out for scheduling butchering meat because there's so much work for them.
So what took place? What's taking place in what you're talking about? So the one thing I had on my side was my grandma.
Hmm.
My grandma raised me until about it was when that middle school time when I didn't live at that house anymore, because just at that point my mom and then my aunt, her marriage failed, and so the house was full of these women all going at it all the time. So I ended up like right around 14 or 15. My buddy let me just him and his
Too
parents
much
were like,
estrogen.
yeah, they just let, and it was a lot of it was crazy. But the whole time that my grandmother was raising me, from the age of 8 years old to while she still had her hands on me, till about 13 or 14, somewhere right around in there, maybe 15, she was real adamant about hard work. She worked
Hmm.
her job at the hospital, um, went there every day, didn't call out. She was an information service person where she was one of those key enters. If you worked, if it's old school stuff, hospitals used to have people that had to take all these records and manually key them in.
Hmm.
This is before they had all these scanners and everything now. And she would walk me around in that hospital. It was more regional hospital. And everybody that we went to, like that would walk by her in the hallway that worked there, would say, "Hey, Vivian, how are you doing?" And everybody did. And I remember saying, "Grandma," I was like, "How does everybody know you?" She's like, "Well, I've worked here for a long time and I have a good reputation." And she explained to me, not only the value of hard work, she would pay me to do things around the house, or she would really advocate getting out and doing something. If I said I was bored, she'd find something to do. So you didn't tell her bored. When we walked around the hospital, she said it takes 10 years to build a good reputation. I've been here for years. I've built a good reputation. She says, all I'd have to do is talk about gossip. People would want to come to her with gossip and want, say about so-and-so. She said, don't tell me about it. I don't want to know, because it only takes 10 minutes to mess up that 10-year effort of getting your relationship, getting where your people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 10 years to build that, 10 minutes to mess it up. And so I learned throughout being in this neighborhood, I always sort of, I don't know, you learn it when you think about that. When you think about it takes 10 years to build a decent reputation, 10 minutes to mess it up. Those words never have left my head. You think about that and you realize that all you have to do that is just be a decent person. Be honest. Gossip may be fun, but man, if you think about the pettiness behind it, stay away from it. Don't get involved in it, because if you work with a lot of people, you're going to cause problems. And she was good at that. And for some reason, now don't get me wrong, I partied and did all kind of bad things. All those words were in there and never left. And I got older, and all the things that she told me would be coming true, so far as if you do this and if you do that. I didn't forget those words. And I didn't lie to myself either. That's how I was able to quit drinking, other than, God helped me.
Yeah,
you look at people when you're in a stage of being a real raging alcoholic and you're around other people drinking, you get to be around different age groups, and you get to watch people. You can actually get a line of progression. You can see the people that's your age hanging out, some of the older dudes, and as they got older, you can actually see how it's ruined them physically and mentally. And I was like,
yeah, where are they? Yeah. And if you don't change, that's where you're going to be at that age too.
And if you tell yourself otherwise, you're just lying to yourself. And so I realized that. And so put that and God together. God was like, he gave me the ability to realize it. He's like, when I got older, which I'm 40 now, which is not old, but getting up there, I want to be able to run. I want to talk with integrity. I want people to think that I've got some sort of value to this earth. And I don't, and I could do that. All I could do is just not be drinking. And I've had the most fun. I've had other things too. Trust me. We could go on for hours. We'd have to do episodes.
And now you're in charge of this garage, and you've got people coming to you. You've got all this thing going on. You're running your own YouTube channel. You've got over 11,000 subscribers. So if somebody that's watching that's not a subscriber, please go and make sure that you click on the link down below and follow him. But I really wanted to share your story, William, because I think that there's a lot of people for whom they don't want to go the college route. Maybe they didn't even graduate from high school. It's like, well, what can I do?
I got my GED in prison, by the way.
Well, yeah. So
I did. I got 30 game days. I was supposed to get out on December 27th. By the time my game days came in, it only gave me a few days, but I got December 19th. And I want to say that was in, this is 21. I think it was an 05 or 06 when I got out of it. Anyways, I was like 24, 25 when I got out.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just a very inspiring story. I think that a lot of people who are watching, hopefully this was something that they needed to hear to give them encouragement to be able to be successful like you've been, even though everybody makes mistakes, but being able to learn for it and move forward, I think is really inspirational. And I really want to thank you for taking this time today to join me on this and to share that with everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, we will see you next time. And remember also, William is on This Way Network. His show is the Fox and Archibald show. What day is that play?
It plays on Mondays.
Okay.
And it comes on, I think it's like 12 o'clock. It's 12 and then 1 o'clock. Yeah. 1 hour of Fox and Archibald, then 1 hour of Blue Collar Talk. Blue Collar Talk comes off after.
Oh, that's right. You're on that as well. So you're really busy.
It's a lot of fun, man. People need to realize this. Just keep trying. Do not, if you want, all you gotta do is want something bad enough. That's all you gotta do. And
just gotta take that step.
Everything I've ever wanted to do, I've learned. It didn't matter what it was. If I wanted to learn something, I figured it out. Or all right. Yeah, that's all you gotta do.
All right. Well, thank you again very much, William. I appreciate it. And I'll see you on one of those channels again soon here.
Yes, definitely. We'll have you on the Fox and Archibald show soon. You're going to be on there.
Okay. All right. Well, great. God bless, William, and I'll talk to you later.
You too.